All right. All right. Welcome. Welcome. Good morning. It's nice to see you all here, bright and early. Everybody's half awake at least. Alden's here to talk about proactive patching with Jamf App Installers. He's going to keep you on the edge of your seat. Thank you.
Guys, thank you. Thank you. All right, guys. Good morning. Thanks for joining. Last day JNUC. Let's get this moving. All right. My name is Alton Brailovsky. I'm an IT engineer at BitSight Technologies, and like many of you, I am also responsible for Jamf and the Apple kind of ecosystem at BitSight, alongside working with Jamf and kind of working on the backend infrastructure of some of our internal systems. Like many IT people, wearing many hats, working on different things. So definitely quite busy in the kind of IT space. If you guys have any questions, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, also on Mac Admins, Elton_BR. So feel free to reach out. And yeah, let's do it. All right, so here's our agenda for today. This is going to be a complete guide to building your very own Org Explorers program. So we're going to talk about the problem, some of the current methods with patching, some of the current tools and approach, what our solution or the suggested solution is, setting up Org Explorers, maintaining version control, and essentially having some app feedback flows. We'll have a demo and then some time for Q&A. So the proof on why patching matters and why we're doing any of this. So Marsh McLellan is one of the world's leading professional services firm in risk, strategy, and insurance. So research conducted by them and by BitSight shows that the speed at which software is patched is directly correlated with an organization's likelihood of experiencing a cyber event. According to this independent analysis, patching cadence is one of the top risk vectors that directly correlates to an organization's likelihood of experiencing a cyber incident. So patching cadence is super important to maintain and establish. So what is patching cadence? Let's define it. It's basically just a measure of how many systems within an organization's network are affected by vulnerabilities and how quickly that organization remediates them. So it's basically also the frequency with which an organization applies patches to its systems. Patching is critical in any organization. However, finding a balance is vital in maintaining your user experience and environment in terms of stability. Have you ever downloaded a new version of an app or an update to find it filled with bugs, issues? Now imagine that at scale with hundreds of employees all over the globe, everywhere. Well, mess, not a good time. Patching during these business critical times can result in a negative experience both to end users and to the business. Now, let's talk about some of the current methods and some of the current tools that are available. So method one, you could use Jamf Patch Management, but this still involves sourcing a package, testing the package, uploading the package to Jamf, setting up your patch definitions, setting up the actual policy, scoping it out, deploying it, testing it, and then deploying it further. Still kind of a process, right? You could use a second method. You could use a policy. But here you'd still have to source the package, test the package, upload the package to Jamf, set up the policy, set up your groups, set up your scope, essentially deploy, test it, and so on. Still quite a manual process and quite tedious. Or everyone's absolutely favorite method is just reaching out the old-fashioned way, just being, hi, I need you to remediate this. Here are the steps. Let me know when it's complete. Obviously, this is not scalable, not very fun, both for IT and for the end users, because it takes time away from their days, and just kind of provides a little bit more friction than IT would like to have. So we definitely don't want to use that method if we can avoid it. So with some of the tools, they do exist, but they do sometimes lack some of the controls that we kind of need or want to essentially have to maintain this business continuity, kind of this easy flowing process. So while they do exist to automate and simplify the patch management process, they typically still rely on third parties, which according to some CISOs, is not always the best and not always the most trusted. So while open source is great, it's sometimes isn't always kind of the name of the game here, especially when we're just looking at several kind of repos from different people, without kind of any hard controls in place. So the problem with also only using automatic patching is while useful in keeping systems up to date, it can cause problems when apps aren't initially tested, especially at scale. As I mentioned before, updates are released at random and sometimes during business critical times. For example, 4:45 on the last day of the month, on the last day of the quarter. Yeah, never a fun conversation to have with any executive or any C-suite people. So again, if we can avoid that, that is the name of the game here. Now, here's what matters most. We want to protect the user experience. That is number one. But we also need to maintain and consider proactively managing and mitigating risk, and that is truly vital in any organization's approach to patching. So finding your proactive approach while maintaining a balance is the name of the game here, as I said. So here's what we use. We opt for an N-2 approach or an N-1 approach for browsers. Essentially what this means, we're 2 versions behind the latest stable release. And for desktop software, we are 1 version behind the latest stable release until we basically test, confirm, and then deploy that everything is working and essentially not going to brick anybody's computers. So we also leverage Jamf App Installers because they're trusted and they're native. So that gives CISOs and kind of orgs just some extra kind of control and peace of mind when we're deploying these patches from Jamf App Installers. So having a clear solution is to, again, always build native if you can. We want to essentially build 2 app deployments, which allows for one subset of users to test new versions, while the rest of the organization sits on the N-1 or N-2 patching cadence that we just established in the last slide. So when new versions are tested, or once a newer version comes out, manually updating the org's deployment is key in maintaining this version control. So your tester group will always get the latest builds, while your org is always getting the manual N-1 or N-2 builds according to if they've passed your testing, essentially. So introducing org explorers. When you implement org explorers, you can be fully hands-off in maintaining and managing your deployment groups. You can empower your employees to volunteer and become part of the patching process, and you can use self-service to simplify enrolling and opting out, empowering them to do essentially all of the work. So what is Org Explorers? Now let's talk about it. In essence, again, it just allows for employees to opt in to testing the latest stable builds or newest versions of apps when they're released for Jamf App Installers, while the rest of the org is maintaining their patching cadence, which we, again, established earlier. So let's set this up. The first step is to create an Org Explorer static group. This is just going to be a blank static group that we're going to use for our script. Please note the group ID, which can be found in the URL up at the top. We'll use this for script parameter 7 in our enroll and opt-out policies. All this will also be essentially uploaded so you can have the guide as well. So I know it's kind of going to be a few slides. Here's basically what that static group would look like. Just a simple static group, computers, static group, create new, done. Now we're going to create our regular patching smart group. So this does not include members of our Org Explorer static group that we just created, but does include any of the devices that we'd like to patch. So again, basically set up all of your devices in your org that you want patched on the N-1 or N-2 approach, and then exclude the Org Explorer static group, which we just created. So this is, again, just a visual of what that looks like. Pretty simple. Set up your grouping, or set up your criteria for your group, and then exclude the static group. So we're going to create our Org Explorer smart group now. The reason that we do this is essentially because Jamf App Installers can only be scoped to smart groups. So we basically have to do a little bit of a workaround to get that static group to essentially be our also smart group. So when we create this group, this group should only contain members of the Org Explorer static group. And again, the reason that we do this is because they can only be scoped to smart groups. So here's what that would look like. The smart group, again, should only contain those Org Explorers static group that we just created. OK, now let's continue the setup. Now we're going to create 2 deployments per app. This is going to target, essentially, one version is going to target your Org Explorer smart group, which is always going to be on the automatic update method. while the other deployment for, again, the same app is going to target the regular patching group that we just created for our smart group. So here's what that looks like. Basically, both the groups together, essentially, again, Org Explorers group will get the automatic patching, and then all of your regular patching group will get the N-1 or manual patching, which we will select essentially later once new versions come out. Now we're going to set our initial distribution method to make available in self-service. We'll do this for both deployments. Essentially, what this will allow users to do is to manually re-download or download if they don't already have the app installed. If they do have it installed, the app will become managed. They'll have the reinstall option in self-service, which is a great update from Jamf, which honestly happened like a month or two ago. So shout out, that was great. Here's again what that looks like. So just set your update method, simple as just pressing the little circular dial there. And then here's basically what that should look like. Again, so you're going to have your Org Explorers App Installer deployment group on the automatic update method. And then here's going to be your regular patching group, again, on the manual method. So essentially, you'll want to create, again, 2 app deployments per app that we're essentially putting out or putting into self-service. Here's what that should look like for both your Org Explorers and non-Org Explorers group, with make available in self-service as the initial distribution method, and automatic and manual patching for the update method. So now we're going to set our default global user interaction settings for all app installers to simplify scaling and deployment. So what this has done is basically just allows you to streamline all of your user interaction settings, which is super easy, especially when you can just essentially just deploy an app, use the default, and then make any changes if needed, of course. So if there's a 0-day, you can also update kind of per app specifically. But generally speaking, this is kind of what we go for. We usually do a 7-day deadline and then a 60-minute grace period before the app will quit and then auto update. So again, you can set these user interaction settings. These settings can include deadlines, grace periods, update complete behavior, whether or not you want the app to open, et cetera. Now we're going to create our API role and API client. This is basically going to be used to manage the self-service portion of opting in and opting out. So the API role that we're going to create, we're just going to name it Jamf Org Explorers or Org Explorers. And we're going to basically give it 2 permissions. It's going to have the update static group permission and the read computers permission. Here's again what that looks like, just a little bit bigger. And now we're going to create our API client. So this new API client in Jamf is going to be assigned to the Org Explorers API role that we just created. And then the default token lifetime is fine, so I think that's set to 60 seconds. And then you're going to want to note the client ID, client secret, because we will use those in our script parameters. So again, here's what that looks like. Simple as creating it. Note you do have to save it, and then sometimes it will ask you to generate your client secret, and then it'll become active. So just so you know. All right, let's talk about the scripts that power this. Feel free to access them by scanning this code and then clicking on View GitHub. After the presentation as well, I'm going to link essentially all of the how-to guide as well, so you can follow along, because I said it's quite a few slides. But more session resources will also be posted later this afternoon. The code is already on GitHub, so it's just 2 scripts, essentially your enroll and opt-out script, so feel free. And again, this is going to be updated kind of as needed, and I'll continuously maintain this. All right, so we're going to upload the provided enroll script to Jamf, and then we can also optionally set our parameter labels in the options tab, just to make it easier. Essentially, I'm one of a few admins, so we don't really have people necessarily accessing our Jamf instance that shouldn't have eyes on it. So, this is fine to do, at least for our org. Here's again what that looks like. You can set your parameter labels kind of accordingly. So again, a URL of your instance, client ID, client secret, and then your static group ID for your static group. OK, so now we're going to upload the opt-out script to Jamf. And again, we can set the parameter labels in the options tab. Same exact thing, just now we're opting out, or we're using the opt-out script instead. Here's again what that looks like, just a little bit bigger. And then now we're going to create our enroll policy. So here's kind of all of the steps put together, but we essentially need two actions. So we need the enroll script, and then we also need the update inventory step. Though that's kind of essentially what's driving and building all of this, and essentially helping the user opt in, and then updating inventory, which refreshes self-service, and then essentially allows them to opt out or see the opt-out button once they've enrolled. So we're going to create our enroll policy. For the triggers, we don't need any. You can just leave them blank. And then we're going to set our execution frequency to ongoing, because again, this is just going to live in self-service, so it's just going to always be there for users to opt in if they would like. And then now we're going to set our script parameter values. So again, this is going to be your URL, client ID, client secret, and then your static group ID from the original static group that we created. OK. So now we're going to configure the update inventory action in the maintenance tab. Select the checkbox, and then you're good to go. And then you're going to set your policy scope to the regular patching group. And then what's key here is we're going to exclude the Org Explorer static group here. And again, what that will do is this will make it so that in self-service, essentially both, whether you're enrolled or not enrolled, it will show the proper, essentially, button, or the proper policy, essentially. So whether you opt in or opt out, this will basically be able to handle that with the exclusion. So again, here's what that should look like for both policies. So pretty simple. And now we're going to customize self-service. I always like to say I studied advertising and marketing in school, which is true, and visual brand identity. So my big thing is, we want to try to make it pretty. We want to try to make it understandable. And we want to make it easy and provide as little friction as we can to the end user. So here's just what that looks like for our self-service. Basically gives them an FAQ, kind of some information. And then, if you scroll essentially down, there's some guidance on how to report feedback and such. So now we're going to create the opt-out policy, which should, again, also include the two actions, or the two steps, if you will. So we're going to need our opt-out script this time, and then we're going to need our update inventory step again. So pretty much exactly the same as what we did for the enroll. We're going to basically mirror that for the opt-out. And again, we're going to select the ongoing execution frequency with no trigger, as again, this will live exclusively in self-service. So once the user is enrolled, they will see the opt-out button, and then vice versa. OK. So now again, we're going to set our script parameter values. So that's going to be your URL, client ID, client secret, and static group ID. Go ahead and put those in. And then we're going to, again, configure the update inventory step in the maintenance tab, select the checkbox. And then we're going to select our scope. And this time, we're just going to target the Org Explorer static group. So again, this will make it so that the members, whoever has enrolled, will essentially see the opt-out policy once they are already enrolled. So again, here's a preview of what that looks like, and when it's all put together, kind of both together. OK, and again, part 2, we're going to customize self-service, but this time for the opt-out script. So make it easy, make it visual for the people. This is what that looks like for us. Essentially, same exact content, except the button or the logo is just red, so it makes it very, very obvious that you are opting out. OK, and again, here the policies put together with their scopes, their execution frequencies, so you can see kind of what that looks like. OK. So with this implementation, you can now confidently maintain version control of your apps. Then, when new versions are available and have been tested by the Org Explorers group, you can then confidently deploy to your org. So essentially what this looks like, again, you have essentially newest version is released. That gets tested for maybe a few days. And then assuming all is well, you can basically push that to your organization. So in case you haven't used app installers before, here's what to look for when a new version is released. So you're basically just going to press on the little circle with the little arrows. And then that's basically how you can select your version and deploy from there. So how to select new versions for manual update method. Again, this is kind of what that looks like. What we opt for as well is we have a patching day just to streamline everything. So we do patch Tuesdays. Keeps things simple. That way users aren't kind of bombarded with updates throughout the week. Kind of, again, maintains peace of mind, user experience, and just ease of use for everybody. And then Alternatively, you can also space out deployments according to business needs. So let's say you have maybe a 0-day here and there, which is never fun, right? But if that happens, you don't want to kind of bombard all of your users all at once to do all of these things. So kind of spacing that out is sometimes what we have to do. Optionally, you can create a feedback form to gather your data from your tester group. This is what we use to gather feedback. Honestly, most apps are pretty good because, again, once they're tested, the developer puts them out. Jamf also tests them along with other open source people in the community. So typically, there's no kind of problems, but it is still good to gather that feedback. We have gotten, especially when new OSs come out, new features, new bugs, and things that might not kind of be as expected or working as expected. So that always helps to create documentation or just gives IT the ability to kind of peep into the end user's brain a little bit and figure out what they're truly kind of looking for or what that experience looks like. So here's a rundown of what that feedback form for a policy setup would look like. It's really just as simple as configuring a files and process step with an execute command option, and then you can just do open and then paste your URL. So we basically use our ticketing system to gather that information. Users will fill out that form. They'll select which app is giving them issues, drop a comment on what's going on, submit it, and then that'll open a ticket in our instance for our support channels. Here's again what that policy preview looks like. Super simple. Again, execute command, open, insert your URL, good to go. Here's what that looks like in self-service. So again, you can slap a nice logo on it, make it nice, make it easy to read, give some users some information, and kind of describe what exactly this is and what it does and what the point of it is. OK. So additionally, you can also use Jamf routines to set up alerts for new members. So we actually just implemented this. Honestly, this is just a good way to track. So with the newer connections as well, so actually when I built this, this was before the Jamf routines had the updated connections to Slack and the updated connections to Jira and kind of the other services. So we are going to kind of also implement this a little bit more, but typically the way that we have this set up right now is we basically have it send a Slack message and then open a ticket. That way we can just track and just see basically who's actually interested. Is this even useful? Why are we building any of this to begin with, right? So that keeps things active. All right, demo time. So here's what that looks like. Users can enroll and opt out as they wish. And I'm pretty sure this GIF is not going to play until I do this. There we go. So again, users can opt in and opt out as they wish. According to Jamf's documentation, updates can be pushed to end users' hosts within about 20 minutes. So this is going to be if the app is already previously installed. An easy workaround for this is to essentially just have the user reinstall the app. Or again, within 20 minutes or so, Jamf will essentially take that app over, make it managed, and then you don't really have to worry about it. So usually what we say to people is, if there's an issue going on, you can also try, with an app, for example, you can try opting out, reinstalling that app with the new kind of N-1, N-2 version, or the latest version, depending on which group that you're in. And then that typically shows, hey, yes, it was this app, or no, it wasn't this app that was causing this, issue. So making it super simple for your users to essentially maintain their kind of membership in this program, and then kind of be a part of the process as well, which is super important, which again just minimizes the friction with IT, which is kind of the name of the game here. So this is, again, just a little bit bigger of what the end user experience looks like. So as you can see, users can click, enroll. Basically, it'll spin, it'll do its thing. It'll add them to the static group on the back end, update their inventory. That will also scope them to the smart group, which then basically scopes them to the app installer, and then essentially deploys from there. And then same thing with the opt-out policy. So again, users can click the opt-out policy. Essentially, that removes them from the static group, which then also removes them from the smart group. And then again, that basically changes their deployment target method for which version that they're on. So what updates looks like, what the updates look like based on what your user interaction settings are set up for. So this is kind of what we do. Again, we usually do a 7-day deadline with a 60-minute grace period. We found that to be pretty effective. And then we do have, obviously for 0 days and more critical things, timeframes that are significantly shorter for that. So depending on what our what our internal security team kind of needs, we can accommodate. But for general apps and general maintenance and whatnot, we found that 7 days is usually fine. This also kind of helps as well when people are on vacation, out of office, life happens, right? So this is a good balance for what we've found. Again, they'll appear as notifications if you want that. So we have it set to a banner notification. Basically, you'll get them. So 7 days, maybe 3 days. All right, no, the app has 60 minutes before it's going to close. All right, the app is closing. It's updating. All right, app has been updated. Update complete. App reopens, and then you're done. So here's what you, as a Jamf admin, can expect. Experience-wise, when selecting new app versions, again, essentially, and I think I have to press the little GIF button again. There we go. So essentially, again, when new versions are released and tested, you can basically click on the little circular button. That will make it, essentially known that there's a new app available, and then you can now make an informed decision because your org explorers have tested the app. They know that it works. It's not going to brick people's computers, and you can confidently deploy to your organization. Does anybody have any questions? I was going to say, I don't know if the person with the mic is here, but if not, I don't think they are. Feel free to shout out, and I'll repeat the question for the recording.
I really like the idea of you kind of artificially making like a patch day.
Yep.
Can you explore if you can use the API to update the Jamf app version?
That's a good question. So the question was if we've thought about using the Jamf API to update the app version based on during the patch day. So right now, that's not something that we've thought of, but that's definitely something that we could iterate on and something that would be useful. I think also the more an organization grows and the more it scales, kind of using APIs and using tools that will make your life easier is definitely the name of the game. So that's definitely a great call out and something that we should do. Yeah, go for it.
Do you use, in your enrollment workflows, do you use these same installers to keep everybody on the same version for your org?
You got it. So the question was, during our enrollment, do we use the same versions or do we use the same kind of method? So the answer is we do. Usually with app installers, again, because it takes about 20 minutes for them to download. So what we end up having to do is depending on the device, sometimes we do actually have a policy that is also scoped, essentially for the enrollment complete trigger. So it's basically just a race of does the MDM command go first or does the policy go first? Essentially with either method, Jamf App Installers will eventually take that app over anyway. So even if that policy essentially is kind of ultimately what goes first, that Jamf App Installer will still install subsequently.
And then second question, for people that decide to use other methods to update their applications, such as visiting Google, do you do anything to roll that back or prevent that from happening, or do you just allow them to update?
Good question. So the question was, do we allow people to download or update just from the source directly, so whether that be Google or just from the software like GUI itself? So the answer is we do. Typically, essentially, what we usually opt for is if we can empower our employees to update, that is honestly the best thing that we can do. So we don't have any kind of gripes or issues with that. Eventually, what will happen though is depending on their group. So let's say they do get like the latest version, but they're not in the Org Explorers group. Jamf App Installers will eventually take that app over again and give them that right version. So while in the beginning they might have the latest version, once they once all the smart groups kind of take over and everything gets scoped correctly, they will then kind of get back down to that version. But again, it's not too bad. So we wouldn't discourage people from doing that. Any other questions?
Hey, great presentation.
Yeah, thank you.
How many people actually opt in?
So the question is, how many people opt in? Good question. So right now we have about 25, 30. So it's not too many, but again, we kind of want to empower our employees to be part of the process. So if we can, kind of take away that friction or take away that mystery of, hey, why is IT always pinging me or bothering me to update? That's kind of why we do it. But we have found that also relaying the information, so doing like, like a tech talk or like a lunch and learn or something like that, is always helpful as well, because just the more people that are informed about what it is actually we're trying to do, I feel like that's just kind of what gets people excited. And so It might be more of a, I don't know versus, hey, this is really cool because now I know about this. So I think definitely kind of encouraging your users and educating them on kind of why we're doing this and what this is the key to kind of getting more people. I would definitely like to have more people opt in, but again, it's a voluntary thing. So
What's that like percentage-wise for your org?
I'd say it's about, that's a good question. We have, I'd say it's like 5-10%-ish. It's not too bad. So it is nice. It is a span of a few different departments. So that's kind of like what we really wanted to do is just get, maybe somebody from engineering, somebody from marketing, somebody from sales, kind of the spread, because obviously their use cases are massively different in what they use their laptops for. So if we can get at least kind of like one delegate or one representative from each kind of section or org, or kind of, unit, if you will, then that's kind of winning in our eyes at least.
Other than self-service, how are you advertising this?
Good question. So other than self-service, how we're advertising this, basically we have an internet page, like an employee or an intranet page, I should say. So we have basically on there. We also essentially have it linked into some of our knowledge base articles for our support ticketing system. So basically, if users do have issues, kind of at the bottom, we have a little thing that's like, hey, if you have issues with this app, you should try opting into Org Explorers, test the newer versions, or try opting out if you're enrolled. So that's kind of how we do that.
So have you actually caught anything with Org Explorers? Like this would have been a mission critical bug?
We have, yeah. So it's honestly, it was like when new OSs are released, that's really when kind of we catch those like weird one-offs, because we try to do a good job with testing, but again, right, like even with Mac OS like betas and Mac OS versions, it's still difficult to get people to opt in to kind of volunteering and kind of being a part of that process. So we found that if we can kind of maintain that, it kind of works.
So are you saying you're using Org Explorers as well for Mac OS updates?
No, not currently, but that is actually, I had a conversation yesterday with a few folks, and that is something that we're potentially going to do, because especially,
JNUC, you're going to talk about.
I was going to say, so watch out, right? But especially with managed software updates, this is definitely something that can expand to that as well, because it's essentially all the same back end, right? So same kind of concept as an app installer.
How many apps are you managing with this framework?
Good question. So right now we're at about, I think we're 87, I want to say. I just did our metrics numbers like a few days ago, and I think that's what we have. But as well, like when newer apps are released, we try to kind of maintain our internal security, and then we basically maintain kind of, we're always looking at the app installer catalog list, and then if there's anything that's new that we considered, let's say, sanctioned or kind of allowed that we would like to advertise, we'll put it in there. Otherwise, typically what we'll do is if we have an app that, maybe we know people are installing it, but maybe they shouldn't necessarily be installing it, but we still want to keep it patched, typically we'll just use the automatic update method and not include it in self-service, basically not to advertise it. Any other questions? Go for it.
I do have one question. What do you do for apps that aren't, say, in the Jamf App Installer's catalog for your particular one?
Good question. So the question was, what do we do for apps that are not in the Jamf Installer app catalog? So honestly, we usually opt for the other methods, which, yep. So kind of you do what you got to do, right? So usually a policy is the easier one, especially because if it's not in app installers, it's usually probably also not a patch definition, which is kind of what I found. Also, actually something you can set up with your patch definitions in patch management. If you turn on the email kind of notification, that's kind of like a good workaround for letting you know when new apps are available, because there's currently not a way for the email function to notify you for app installers. You can do it for the Jamf admin like notifications, but you can't do it for email. So that's kind of how we know when new things are out as well. Yeah, go for it.
How much wiggle room do you guys give yourself on that N-1, N-2 for things that feel like they have, like Chrome, that feels like sometimes it has 3 or 4 updates a day?
Very good question. So the question is how much wiggle room do we kind of allow ourselves with the N-1, N-2 approach, especially for kind of our really, really popular apps like Chrome, where maybe there's sometimes a few updates even in one day. So funny enough, that's actually why I built this program, because we found that essentially just some browser versions, when they're released, there's just there's a few in one day, and so B, they kind of started breaking computers, and then C, we're like, okay, we want to maintain this, our patching cadence, but also at the same time, we want to, not break everybody's computers. So that's basically kind of how we do it. So usually what we'll do is we'll stick to that like once a week kind of way. But we do have, throughout the week, like we have like our change management meetings. We have our, vulnerability management, things. So it's really when things come up that we need to kind of add, and that's kind of where the wiggle room comes in. But we found that typically for standard like apps that don't have 0 days or like crazy vulnerabilities, usually once a week is fine, or just whenever they're rolled out. Sweet.
How many people opt in and then opt out?
Good question. So the question was how many people opt in and opt out? Honestly, once people are opting in, we found that they typically just kind of stay there. So the only time that they really opt out is if they have an issue with an app, which, as I've said, like has only really been a handful of times, which is, knock on wood, that's great. I love that. That means it's working. But if they do opt out, it is something that we typically will also like ping the user for to be like, hey, I'm just curious what happened. Because usually if you're opting out, that usually means that there is something that made them do that. And so that usually is like a bad app version or a bug or something like that. So that's sometimes the information that we want to gather, which is why we have the Jamf routine set up to kind of ping us on Slack to be like, hey, this computer enrolled with this user. All right, now we can reach out and kind of bug them and be like, hi, what's going on?
Why did you go with a feedback form instead of like pointing to the ticketing system?
So it actually goes to the ticket.
So
Yeah.
it is
Yeah.
overlay,
Yeah. So it's pretty much just a feedback form, and then it just sends to the ticket. Go for it.
Yeah. So you said that what's it called, Jamf apps? What's it called?
App installers.
Over,
Yes.
What's it called? Whenever like somebody has like manually installed them.
Yes.
Have you ever seen it where it just doesn't, or like what do you do if it?
Yes.
doesn't?
So very good question. So the question was, what do we do if an app installer essentially doesn't end up managing that app? So let's say it doesn't end up kind of within that 20-minute mark, doesn't end up taking that app over or reinstalling it. Usually what we have to do is you basically just undeploy and then redeploy the app installer, which we'll do it for everybody, which kind of does stink, but that is generally what we found to be successful. So it's usually kind of a one-off case, and then also if you have a failed deployment, you can also just press retry deployment as well. So that kind of helps too. Yeah.
How do you handle apps that have their own self-updating mechanisms, like Office that has the auto update app?
Good question. So the question was, how do we manage the apps that have auto updates built in? So for example, like Office and Microsoft, the suite. So honestly, the easiest way to get around that is to enable the configuration profile in the app installer, and then that kind of essentially disables that. Disables all the automatic updates native to the app, and then makes it so that Jamf kind of is responsible for maintaining that. Any other questions? It's very bright up here, so I apologize. No? Awesome. Sweet. If you do have a question, feel free, shout them out. Otherwise, I'll hang out, but thank you so much.